All right, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Going to get started with the Modern Family Newsletter Dynasty, Modern Family Newsletter week recap of the weekly newsletter. And today we're going to go over some interesting topics. You can see from kind of the headline here how Wall Street's retirement formula pads their pockets and robs your quality of life. And so we're going to talk about kind of the concepts in the newsletter. We do these kind of every, let me get my audio down here. We do these every week to kind of go through questions and answers and just kind of provide a little more in-depth details on what's going on in the newsletter. So my name is Denver Noes, president of Wealth for Life. And when we talk about, this kind of Wall Street mainstream advice for financial planning, and how much you actually need to save for retirement, this 4% rule is something that comes up all the time. And the 4% rule is basically the safe withdrawal percentage, the amount you're able to take out of a stock and bond portfolio for 30 years. And that is going to make that percentage then makes it so you have a higher probability of not running out of money because you have all the ups and downs of the markets, doesn't actually account for things like taxes and inflation. But you're supposed to be able to withdraw that percentage and then, not run out of money during retirement. So the problem with that, particular thing is it assumes that all of the assets are invested in the stock market. And so that's where when you see these savings goals of like how much you're supposed to be saving for retirement, these percentages get really enormous. And so as you see from the chart right here, if you're just starting to save and you're 40 years old and you're making $200,000 a year, you need to be saving 30% of your income to maintain that standard of living. But the key thing with all of this is it's based on this 4% rule that assumes that you have all of your assets in the stock market. And that really is kind of part of the issue, because there's an interesting story that Axios has pointed out recently about how, this is the first generation that is going to use the 401ks for their primary source of retirement income. In the past, it was pensions. So as they said here, the 401ks, people that have these are getting in there. Now they have to manage how much they can take out. They have to turn this lump sum into an income stream. And even when people have money, it's creating incredible amounts of stress and worry because it's the stock market, right? And again, I'm not anti-stock market. I'm an investment advisor. I use investments. I just realized that, hey, there's a lot of faults with this plan. And the studies are even showing now that as baby boomers are in retirement, they're spending through those 401ks in a much different manner than they were before. And a lot of that is, again, people are trying to follow this 4% rule. But the interesting thing is when you think about this and you think about how volatile markets are and compared to what they were, where people had pensions and income streams like this article is saying here, when you think about pensions, people didn't really care the rate of return of the pension. It was because it was money in their mailbox every month. They had a check, they had a pension. You probably know people that had pensions or have them now. And it's just, they don't really care. My money's coming in every month. So what happened and then you had these big market, run-ups, the 401k was invented roughly in the 1980s. And so you had, this big market run-up from money coming into 401ks helped to drive the market up. And then you had this next boom cycle where money was coming in thanks to 0% interest rates from the Fed, driving those returns up. So now we're at this point where we still have to see, can we now take these assets, convert them into income streams? And that's what retirees are finding out is pretty difficult. And what's ironic to me is when you look at, like what this article says right here on, why did pensions go away? Well, to remain solvent, as the quote says here, you had the best pension managers in the world investing in stock and bond portfolios to try and provide income for their employees. They couldn't do it. They couldn't successfully manage stock and bond portfolios to create long-term income streams for their employees. That's why pensions went away, because they couldn't get the returns high enough and the liability was too high. So, of course, then what did they do? They decided, all right, well, you have to now provide that and do that for yourself. So it's just a little bit mind-boggling. They couldn't do it with the best management in the world. So now they just offloaded it to you, and they say, hey, you have to manage your own retirement and do all this stuff, even though we couldn't do it. So that's why a lot of this becomes a problem. And that's why in the newsletter, I talk about whose idea was this, that, you're working hard your whole life to save much of your savings, what you can control, you can control how much you save, but then you get to retirement. Now everything is outside of your control. You have no control of what's going to happen in the markets, and your retirement success is dependent on that. So that's why I think when you start to learn different strategies, and one of the things, you get away from this idea, this is conventional wisdom. You've probably seen these charts. You're going to build wealth up, and then that wealth is going to start to decline. and you're going to hopefully not run out of money. That's what all the 4% rule stuff is designed. You're going to spend it up, your wealth is going to peak and it's going to go down, when really what we're trying to do is more go into, this is what we want wealth to happen with wealth, where your money is going to continue to grow and it's going to accelerate throughout your life. And that's the process that's supposed to happen. So one of the keys to kind of learning that is understanding what we talk about in this week's newsletter as the withdrawal rate of the assets. So the withdrawal rate of the assets dramatically affects how much you're able to save, or the amount that you need to save is a better way to say it. So you can see here from the chart, when you're following a 4% rule with a stock and bond portfolio, you got to have 3 million in assets to get to that 120,000 a year income level. So if you have a 6% withdrawal rate, you need 2 million in assets. If you have an 8% withdrawal rate, you need 1.5 million, and 12% withdrawal rate, 1 million. So the withdrawal rate of the assets dramatically affects how much you need to save. So there's many other cash flowing type strategies that will have much higher withdrawal rates than the markets. And that's where, again, it's not to be anti-market, but there's things, of course, like real estate, there's insurance strategies, there's business income, there's lots of alternative assets that have higher withdrawal rates that are really more designed around cash flow and producing cash flow producing assets. So that can make life a lot easier because, in the olden days, of course, when you think about real estate, like the example I gave in the newsletter, you would go out and you buy a rental property, you put 20% down. Then the renter, you're going to rent that out. The renter ends up paying off that property for you 10, 15 years later. And now you get to retirement, you have this free and clear property that's rented out. So it took a long time for that strategy to work. And we're going to talk about real estate in the next section, covering the newsletter on the chart section. But that was the idea. You'd have cash flow producing assets like the pensions, annuities, insurance strategies, real estate, business income, alternatives, all these other things that, so no matter what's happening in the world, you're having money coming in, but many of those have a higher withdrawal rate. So we're trying to incorporate those in some of the shortcuts, in those particular strategies. Of course, is using financial leverage. And this is something we're going to talk more about in the upcoming event that we have. We're going to go into a deeper dive in these types of strategies, but larger amounts of money in safe assets beats less money in risky assets every time. Every time. That's something that all the high net worth people know. And that's very important to start using leverage. And then, as I mentioned in the newsletter, you start combining that with controlling assets, income streams, controlling taxes, and controlling income. So that's really what financial security is based on. It's not based on something like a 4% rule where you're just going to withdraw 4% of the stock bond portfolio and life is going to be on an easy street. So we are going to go into a deeper dive on those strategies, coming up. And that event will be up on September 14th. And I'll actually throw up a QR code. So you can actually scan that code. It is on LinkedIn if you go to my profile, or make sure you're connected with me and you can make sure you get an invite. But we'll go into a deeper dive. This is the 5 secrets millionaires use to cut taxes by 50% and 5x their wealth, part 2. So the last event we did last month, we had about 490 attendees, got some great feedback. You can use that QR code to attend the event. But we'll go into a deeper dive on strategies, not only to cut taxes, but other ways that you can use strategies that have higher withdrawal rates. You can use financial leverage. All of those can make your life less easier, so you're not dependent on, just this 4% rule and what's happening in the markets. So, but from there, let's go into now the next section of the newsletter where we talk a little bit about real estate. And some of the charts are pretty interesting on real estate right now. So U.S. homeowner vacancy rates are at the lowest level they've been in 70 years. It's pretty incredible at that level. And also when you look at rental homes and apartment vacancy, all extremely low. So, the big thing was like when everyone saw interest rates going to rise, and the Fed did, fastest time in history. Is that really going to cause a housing bubble and, cause these prices to come way down and have these things burst? And of course, we really haven't seen that. And that's because a lot of factors here, which we'll go over, but some of them is inventory is still extremely low. There's still a shortage of multifamily and affordable housing, single family. And that trend is not something that is going to correct, anytime soon. And when you look at affordability, this may be more of a driver of where, okay, maybe prices aren't going to fall, but prices may not rise as much either, because this is the affordability index. And as Lance Lambert, who writes for Fortune, wrote in the newsletter, I quoted him, 69% is what income would have to rise for houses to become as affordable for people as they were pre-COVID. 69% jump in income, which is a big number, or a 41% drop in home prices, meaning to get homes to get back to where they were, they would have to drop 41% to get to pre-COVID levels, or rates would have to go from where they are now, say 7.25%, down to below 3%. So one of those or one combination has to happen for homes prices to go back where they were. And this particular chart is showing the home affordability index. And it's interesting that you see the US there at 23%. That means 23% of disposable income goes to housing versus 14% pre-COVID. But we're still one of the more affordable, it looks like the most affordable country of the major countries listed here on affordability of home pricing. Now, it would be interesting to see this on rental data, like, what is the amount of disposable income going to rent? I'd be interested to see that, because I think that's kind of an issue that's going to put a lot of pressure on. But what's also putting pressure here is when you look at construction costs. And so this is, you can see the data there from the chart going back to 1990. At 2020, you have this big spike in construction costs, and that number has relatively stayed there. You haven't seen much of a decrease, so it may not come back down. So then when you're combining that with pressure of home sales, or vacancy rates being low, and there's kind of a shortage of supply and all those other things, prices probably will stay kind of where they're at. Now, this is what becomes the challenge, because we all know, hey, it's great to say that real estate is a great investment, which it is, and it should be part of every high net worth portfolio. Every high net worth client I work with has real estate. It's part of their investments. Because of course it's a long-term hard asset that can be used for cash flow. It can be used for great depreciation. I mean, there's a lot of great reasons to own real estate, but finding those deals right now is a challenge. And I think that when you look at the short-term rental space, which obviously got hot, it was very hot in a lot of in my market here in certain parts of Arizona, and it certainly got overbought. There became a surplus of short-term rentals. We've seen, if you use sites like AirDNA, you can look up the short-term rental revenues in your market, and you'll see that a lot of those have come way down from where they were in COVID level. So there is a lot of people that have homes that they aren't renting as much as they thought. Some of those are underwater, but those people are in at 2.75, 3.25, 3.5%, super low rates. So it's very hard to find those types of deals. There's opportunities, of course, in multifamily and all these other areas. But I think it is hard to find deals right now, and you got to kind of have what I call this boots on the ground. You got to have people in a local environment that know your market, that are really working in those areas and those communities, that can help you find the better deals. And then when you think about the example I gave earlier, we're talking about the 4% rule and what you used to do with rentals and building cash flow. It used to be you'd buy that rental, and again, long-term rental, have the people pay it off. You might not be cash flowing very much on the rental, but 15 to 20 years from now you have this free and clear rental because it's been paid off by the rent by the renters. But do people have the patience for that anymore? Because now we've gotten so used to, like, wow, I can buy a short-term rental and I can have $5 to $7 grand a month coming in right away. So it'll remain to be seen. Do we have to kind of go back to this longer-term time horizon with real estate, get used to more, I would say, realistic yields there? So I'll be interested to know your thoughts with that. If you're, posting here on LinkedIn in the comments or in the group, and other strategies that people have for finding those good real estate deals right now. So that's on the real estate section. Next, in the newsletter, I always do my productivity tip. And this week, I talked a little bit about music and how music is a great tool in all areas of the workplace. So I listen to a lot of music here. My kids were doing homeschooling now, which is a great new stressful experience. But, we have music playing there, music in the workplace. It really affects your brain in a positive way. And there were times before I did this where I would forget how good it is to have music in the background, and how easily music can affect your mood. So if you haven't used music when you're working for a while, give it a try again. You'll probably be pleasantly surprised on how good it works for you. And then finally, in the newsletter each week, we have the concept section where I just kind of throw up a quote or a concept or an image. And this one I thought fits in what we were talking a little bit today about the shortcuts from getting away from this 4% rule, which puts so much financial pressure on you to save, generates lots of revenue for Wall Street. And that is using financial leverage. Many people still confuse leverage with risk, but the reality is that levering up low risk assets so you can diversify away from risky investments is risk reducing. So leverage can reduce risk. And most of the time people think about this in the opposite, debt as being bad. For most people it is, margin accounts and stock accounts, things like that. But when you're using large amounts of other people's money in safe assets, you're going to win every time, compared to the average investor who gets stuck chasing risky assets with their own money, and they tend to lose more often. So that is our weekly Friday recap on the Modern Family Dynasty newsletter. You can use the QR code there to come to the LinkedIn event where we're going to go into deeper dive on a lot of these strategies. And as always, my name is Denver Noah, President of Wealth for Life. Reach out if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.